Well, I study the ways in which people use technology to form social connections, bonds, and communities without any face-to-face contact at all. My central thesis is that people can feel that they've made a genuine connection with someone else, a social bond, even a community, with people that they have never met and may never meet. People feel that they're very much together, even when they're separated by space or even by time. And in fact, most of the time, if you think about it, we are physically separated, even from the people we are closest to. Something of the bond remains in our minds when that happens. And this is what interests me, and this is what I study. I try to find out how far this mental connection can be stretched. Is it enough in and of itself to constitute a social bond, a relationship, to glue together a community, even if people may never meet face to face? I'll give you the short answer to all of my research, and the short answer is that yes, it can. It does form social bonds and communities. In the absence of face-to-face contact, social connections can be vivid, intimate, bi-directional, absolutely authentic, and they represent what people tell me are very human connections for them. And of course, also sometimes they aren't any of these things. Like all social connections, those that are made with absent others exist in a wide range of types and intensities. And let me say straight up what I'm not arguing. I don't argue that face-to-face contact is or will become unimportant to people or irrelevant, or that connecting at a distance is somehow equivalent to or preferable to face-to-face interaction. It is not, and I don't argue that. We need face-to-face interaction. It is critical to our intellectual and social development, and it provides certain satisfactions that are impossible to technologically approximate. And I, for one, am glad of all that. You cannot parent from a distance. But I am arguing, based on my findings, that we easily and often do form connections at a distance, and that they play a large part in human social experience with their own satisfactions and drawbacks. For those of you visiting today from our social research methods class, I want to talk a little bit about my methodology and how I collect the data for my work, and the rest of you can listen in as well. I interviewed 50 people for my first book in depth, 25 who were comfortable with the latest uses of communication technology at the time, and 25 who did not even use computers. I supplemented these interviews with an additional 143 internet surveys to more fully explore that type of technology. And I've continued my research since with a different survey, asking some different questions targeted more towards the portable nature of the social bond and of communities, given the prevalence of mobile and handheld technologies. And this survey and its follow-up have been taken so far by over 80 individuals. I ask people about the experience of connecting at a distance, how it makes them feel, how they think about them, how they perceive them and sustain them, and even sometimes how they break them. I ask them to describe these bonds to me and to think about how all these types of bonds that they make fit together in their lives. I coined the term socio-mental to describe these connections, bonds, and communities because they rely on mental rather than physical togetherness, yet they're still very much social in nature. And also I think that the word virtual does the whole phenomenon a disservice. I mean, really the word virtual tends to imply that something is not quite real. It's virtually real, almost, not quite. And people told me they consider these connections very, very real, even though they usually kept quiet about them, as though it were somehow shameful to care about someone whom they had not met face to face. Anyway, I've been campaigning to dump the word virtual with no success whatsoever. I mean, it's firmly in the literature. There's not much I can do about it. But I think it's a misnomer, part of the problem, so I'm trying to steer people away from that word whenever I talk to them. I try also to identify the properties of these bonds and communities, the social dynamics inherent in the process, and I look at some of the consequences as well. Just a few of them I can touch on here. Many more of them I hit in my class on this topic. But perhaps my favorite finding of all is that when I ask people whether they've ever gotten to know and form a connection with someone they have never met, often I cannot get people to shut up about it. They will talk to me for hours and hours about this feeling. After an initial hesitation, sometimes a little disbelief that I'm even asking this, let alone taking their answers seriously and asking follow-up questions, people tend to tell me in exhaustive detail about an astonishing range of connections to people with whom they're separated, sometimes permanently. And they provide tons of detail attesting to the richness and importance of such connections in their lives. They tell me, for example, about favorite authors, far away or dead family members, heads of state, historical figures, and of course people on the other end of the radio or TV or internet. All but 2 of the 50 subjects I initially interviewed for my first book told me of numerous instances of feeling connected to these distant others. And they would punctuate their descriptions with comments like, "I've never told anybody how this feels," or "I'm glad you don't think this is strange," or "I thought I was the only one who felt this way." I would get countless callbacks, people saying, "I just thought of a few more things to tell you." I mean, I had begun trying to document a phenomenon, and I ended up providing this kind of catharsis to people, like a validation to them that the things that they were doing day to day in their everyday lives weren't nutty or abnormal. But, you know, if a sociologist was asking them questions about it, that there must be some validity to it. And maybe here was their one chance to talk about it. But at the time I started this research, I rarely came upon a study which studied it except in terms of it being seen as fake or inherently problematic. And as you can tell, my position is otherwise, that it is happening so frequently, that it is so common, that there's nothing fake about it. It's very, very real. For example, this woman who told me about her connection to a favorite writer of hers. And a lot of people told me that in reading books, that's what really draws them into the book, the fact that they've made a connection either with the writer or a character. And this woman said to me, I only know so-and-so by her writing and her reputation, but it seems to me that we must think somewhat similarly, so I feel most connected to her. Or someone who said, I will read a particular passage and think to myself, I know what he or she was feeling when they wrote that. I know what precipitated that. Maybe we've shared some experiences. These connections and communities we make with these absent others are both cognitive and emotional, and they feel absolutely authentic to people. Like this person whose connection was mediated to another person by TV and the internet. He got into fantasy football and followed that on TV and began to realize when we talked that he felt like his fantasy football team was his team, almost like he was on it in some way. And he said to me, the funny thing is, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting to know the guys on my team a little bit, like they're my guys, you know? Like last week, one of them made this ridiculous play, really bad, and I got a lot of grief about it. Everyone had something to say about it, and I started to feel bad, like, hey, that's my guy, like I'm responsible for something that he does or something. People feel this way, emotionally attached to favorite fictional characters all the time. That's part of why TV, movies, and books can suck us in. One woman said to me, it's like I really cared about the character of Harley in my soap opera. You know, really in the moment of watching the show, if she were upset, I'd feel really bad for her. In the moment, I get very caught up in wanting it to work out or not wanting her to get caught or whatever. Really caring, kind of like having my fingers crossed that it's going to work out. Really doing that, like I hope she makes it through that car crash. So if we can connect so emotionally to a fictional character, how much more emotionally are we going to connect to people whom we contact directly over the internet or a mobile technology like a cell phone or a BlackBerry? Of those people who use IM, chat, email, or online message boards to connect with others, even people they've never met, I often and repeatedly get comments like, I feel for them, I care about them, these are my friends, I'm so glad I got to know you. Time and time again in my interviews, stories of knowing others in a way that is clearly very strong and very intimate would emerge. And all I can tell you is that these stories are not like people kind of know the people they're talking about. It's like they know them very well. One person described it to me. She said, how can it be personal? It feels like it is. If people said, oh gee, do you know so-and-so? This is a person she knew over the internet. I wouldn't say kind of, I would say yes. I mean, I know his hopes and dreams. Even face-to-face, you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you were communicating all these ways. Online survey subjects told me things like, this feels like an invisible bond that nothing can destroy. It's very cool. It's an extremely positive feeling to know there are people out there who you are connected to. And over again, people told me that they felt comfortable describing these groupings as communities. They usually used the word before I did. In forming sociomental connections, they get the sense that they're not alone, that others with whom they, by they I mean we, have much in common are out there, and invariably this is described as a comforting thing. Engaging in a rewarding experience with someone else who finds it rewarding adds to our own sense of pleasure, and it contributes to a sense of like-mindedness with other people, which may help us feel that there are other people in the world who understand us, and that's a feeling we all need. This rewarding communal kind of feeling was described to me in this way, for example. Someone said, "It's exciting to connect with people in which you have a passionate commonality. I feel like these people are my friends." And the several people who said to me, "It's just a rush, and I can't explain it."